The time is exactly 9:45 a.m. News and views right here on Talar Media, and not a moment too soon. We're finally hearing a bit of good news. I hope it does come to pass. COO of XA Global Trade Advisor, Pieter du Plessis, is online to talk to us about cable theft in South Africa. We understand that SA plans to outlaw the trading of scrap metal, and let's understand what that means for us in the country and as far as the scrap metal trade is concerned. And of course, the stealing of cables, which keeps leaving us in the dark as South Africa. I'm sure Eskom will be very relieved to hear about this proposed plan. A very good morning to you, Pieter du Plessis. Welcome to the program, and thank you indeed for your patience.
That's perfect. Good morning, Julie, and good morning to your viewers.
Okay, tell us very quickly, what is XA Global Trade Advisors all about before we talk about the matter at hand, and that is cable theft?
Julie, we're a specialist international trade practice that assists companies trading globally, access to other markets. We work on policy issues in South Africa, making recommendations and assisting companies to approach government for policy changes. And we also assist in trade remedy matters if the product's imported too cheaply, or if somebody feels that it's unnecessarily challenged, a country is being challenged. And we also assist respondents. So on all trade matters, movement of goods, not the logistics side, but the actual advisory side, we assist government and we assist business.
Okay, so as far as the issue around outlawing the trade of scrap metal, is this good news for South Africa? What happens to the traders in this type of industry? Does that mean we're looking at job losses, or is it just to possibly fine tune the way we operate in these spaces so that we can mitigate
Yeah.
cable theft?
Actually, we've got our hands full and we've got a really big challenge. We've got organized crime syndicates that actually steal us blind, and it disables our infrastructure from rail to electricity. It's a significant compromise to the economy and to companies that need to use and to rely on this infrastructure. And a plan is required, and the proposed measures that's put forward are intended to have a decisive impact. The concern remains that they are legitimate. The majority businesses in the sector are legitimate businesses, and if their trade is severely impacted, it can have a significant impact on jobs and the viability of the industries themselves. Especially the larger players are significantly capital-intensive businesses that employ a lot of people and give indirect work to scrap collectors. So the economic impact of a ban can be significant. It's deemed necessary. At the same time, there's a fair question being asked as to whether something like an export ban would necessarily have the correct and the desired impact. And the reason for that is that for the past few years, we already had export permit processes in place, and we had the preferential price system where you first had to offer your scrap to domestic buyers before you could get a permit to export. There were already control measures on exports in place that required people to be upfront about their trade and upfront about their transactions and share that information in order to be able to even export scrap legitimately. Now, the concern is that the people that will be most affected by any export bans would be the people that have been towing the line all along, correctly classifying their products and correctly reporting their exports to SARS and to the International Trade Administration Commission for the product to exit the country. Now, I cannot really imagine that crime syndicates would follow the legitimate route to export product and to monetize the scrap metal. We also had an issue that partially processed, like melted down copper, for example, that's sold in little billets or ingots, was not part of the scrap ban. It wasn't really controlled in any way like any of the other products, and that's now also receiving focus because you could melt down some copper and export it without any constraints. And now that's also intended to be on the radar, but the question still remains: the exports that do take place that we're now going to hamper, and the cap we're going to put on industry and on the revenue of certain companies that employ a lot of people, whether that would have the desired effect, because those are the people that typically originally already followed an export control process to properly declare the exports. If you can hide an incorrectly classified product, you can still export product illegitimately under the nose of SARS, who can have a limited
Oh.
inspection capacity, and you would not be affected by a ban. I mean, only if you honestly declare what you're exporting will this temporary ban actually have an impact on you. Which means if you're one of the people that haven't been playing by the rules all along, even the best intended measures would still not catch you. And
Mhm.
that's the concern. Are we perhaps sacrificing a lot commercially on legitimate businesses while the illegit trade may still carry on unhindered? So that's why the minister asked for comments. The comment period closed past Friday, 26th of August, and they now need to deliberate the proposed measures and see if it would be worthwhile implementing them in the proposed format, and whether they need to consider whether it will have the desired impact. If it doesn't,
Okay.
the price to be
Mhm.
paid by business will be huge.
Okay, so this talks directly to Eskom, the theft of cables, transformers, overhead lines, and conductors. Eskom claims that it's costing them up to 2 billion rands per annum. And that obviously the ripple effect is felt by you and I and the rest of South Africa,
Mm.
small businesses, large businesses. And if this is in fact true, then according to Eskom, because we have these rolling and ongoing outages, it's impacting on small businesses, large businesses. It's impacting on employment. So how big is the illicit trade of metal that we're unable to contain it, that we've got to go to this level to try and contain it? Is it doable?
It,
And is there no other way for us to be monitoring this to see that the scrap metal is coming from reliable sources, it's not being stolen? We as South Africa, citizens of South Africa, ordinary lay people, are not suffering the consequences which we have suffered and still will be suffering going on till how, when, and why they'll be addressing this problem, we don't know.
Usually, the impact and the damage being caused is significant. I think it's probably still underestimated. We think of Eskom first because we are concerned about blackouts, but we also have steel being stolen from Eskom's transmission lines, where pylons are being chopped down, or we've got railway tracks being cut up, and also copper being stolen from railway signal systems, which means our logistics side, especially if you imagine all the trains that's supposed to run between Gauteng and KZN, for example. Most of that loads have moved to the roads. So you're destroying roads, and it's more expensive. You've got hundreds of trucks every day on the road on the N3. It should be in a more efficient way transported on rail. But rail is not only losing copper; it's always also losing steel and signaling equipment. So the infrastructure damage is significant. Now, what can be done? The proposed plan suggested by Minister Patel covers a few things. There's a temporary ban, obviously. There's also a closer look at the partly processed product, where some things are melted down. And then ultimately, what they also want to do is, in another phase of this proposed plan, they want to look more closely at the Second-Hand Goods Act and tighten all the controls and the level of record keeping that's required for traders and scrap metal dealers. And ultimately, even in the third phase, they're proposing specific legislation around the treatment or trading in scrap metals. And at that point in time, even considering banning cash transactions so that there's more traceability. And I'm sure it will have an impact. It certainly will have an impact. But you also then come back to my initial question. The legitimate people that have proper companies and proper controls in place belonging to industry organizations that control themselves and police themselves even would obviously fill into any proposed requirements and comply with those. But what about the people that export scrap steel and copper, not as copper, as something
So
else?
Okay,
And that's
so Peter, here's the all important question. Should the focus then not be, rather than a blanket ruling or a blanket focus on the entire industry, to try and focus the energies on the illicit scrap metal trade and focus your energies there and try and clamp down on those people? There has to be some form of political will to try and address the situation in a very smart and proactive way.
there certainly is. The challenge is obviously you need a significant crime intelligence capacity to do this. You need dedicated teams. There has in the past for certain periods been a close cooperation between the industry and SARS and the police in the ports. But to sustain that, you need manpower, you need intelligence to be gathered over an extended period to really be effective. And the industry obviously tried to assist as far as they can, but there needs to be a significant focus on the policing side and on the necessary technology to be able to properly assess cargo that's proposed to be something other than scrap metal, but still at least picking it up at the borders, and to perhaps control the number of border points, crossing points where scrap is even allowed. But then again, all those things work as long as something is labeled as scrap or copper or something that's upfront about the nature of the product. If it's in any way hidden or if it's presented as something else, then you're going to have a problem because the effective number of stops that SARS customs can execute at border stoppings and uh, is limited. So as long as something is not labeled as scrap, you still have a concern. Crime intelligence is the issue.
Hey, you know what? We have a huge unemployment force. Let's rope them in. Let's create, let's get them to start monitoring and policing our border posts. The resources are there. We just need to make it happen. It is doable. We need to make sure that we stamp out corruption at border posts and at ports, obviously. Let's pull in all the unemployed people and unemployed youth. Like I say, it's doable. Where there's a will, there is a way. And that's where we have to leave it. It is just very quickly, very quickly. When do we hear whether this is going to go ahead or not?
I suppose due to the sheer urgency of this, we're probably going to get some answer in the coming 2, 3, 4 weeks. I think I would not expect the minister to sit on these proposals for too long. I suspect that we would see an outcome soon. But we need to look at the communities. You talk
Absolutely.
about unemployed people, but communities need to be alert. The communities need to have their eyes open and look after themselves and alert the police. I mean, we have to be more
Let's
more
yeah, Peter, like I said, let's get the unemployed people, let's employ them as our monitors and police these situations. And we probably kill two birds with one stone. But lovely talking with you.
Thank you, Julie.
Sorry, we've run out of time. That was Pieter du Plessis, SA Global Trade Advisors. Hopefully bringing us some good news there as far as the illicit, illegal scrap metal industry is concerned. Our final interview for the morning is with you, Atul from Minara. We'll be with you in a minute or two. Thank you indeed for your patience as well.